A man worth $4 million drives a 2011 Civic, not because he can't afford better, because the upgrade would cost him something the car payment doesn't measure. The question isn't why he stays invisible. The question is what the rest of us are paying to be seen. In 1899, an economist named published a term that would outlive him by more than a century. He called it conspicuous consumption, the practice of spending not for utility, but for audience. Buying what communicates position, not what serves need. What Veblen identified wasn't vanity, it was architecture, a system where spending functions as a social signal, broadcasting position to strangers who will never know the buyer's actual balance sheet. Over a century later, economists at the University of Michigan and colleagues ran the numbers that Veblen's framework predicted. Their 2004 study found that households earning $70,000 annually spent roughly 30% more on visible goods than households with a net worth exceeding $3 million. The families with the least wealth were performing it the hardest. The families with the most had largely stopped. Not because wealthy households were more disciplined, because at a certain threshold, the signal becomes unnecessary. The performance loses its audience, or more precisely, the performer loses interest in performing. The mechanism behind that disinterest is where this gets uncomfortable. The surface explanation is humility. The wealthy person who dresses down, drives modestly, lives in the same house for 20 years. The popular reading is that they are humble, grounded, above it all. That reading is wrong in a specific way. In 2014, researchers at Harvard Business School, Silvia Bellezza, Francesca Gino, and Anat Kainan, published a study on what they called the red sneakers effect. They found that individuals who deliberately violated dress norms in high-status contexts were perceived as more competent than those who conformed. Not because nonconformity signals humility, because it signals that the individual can afford the social cost of breaking the rule. This is the first reversal. What looks like modesty is actually a signal, a more expensive one. But the research points to something more uncomfortable than strategic signaling. Status spending operates like a subscription fee for social positioning. The payment drafts monthly, whether or not the service delivers. And at some point, a certain subset of people, not the most virtuous, just the most financially secure, cancels the subscription. Not out of principle. Out of a cost-benefit calculation that finally tips. The energy required to maintain the visible life exceeds the return. Though Bellezza's framework may overstate the degree of conscious strategy involved, some of this is calculation, some is exhaustion, some is a threshold crossed so gradually the person barely notices the signals falling away. What's clear in the data is the direction. The wealthier the household, the less visible the wealth. The question this raises is what happens inside the gap, inside the space between what someone has and what they let the world see. That gap has a specific shape, and it looks exactly like a person the viewer already knows. There's a particular kind of professional, 41 years old, operations director, earning $165,000 a year. On paper, upper middle class. In practice, running a carefully managed performance of a rival. The leased BMW. The watch purchased on 12 months interest-free. The kitchen renovation financed at 4.9%. Every object chosen not for function, but for what it communicates to the neighbor, the colleague, the in-laws who visit twice a year. Beneath the display in credit card debt. A 401k with less in it than the car in the driveway costs. A net worth that, if calculated honestly, might be negative. What does a rival look like when nobody is watching? The operations director doesn't think of himself as performing. He thinks of himself as living appropriately for his income. The gap between those two descriptions is where the mechanism operates. Every upgrade reads as earned. Every signal feels like identity. The possibility that identity itself is the cost, that what he's financing is not a lifestyle, but a character he plays for an audience that isn't paying close attention. That possibility doesn't arrive as a thought. It arrives as a credit card statement. The people who stop performing don't become free. They become something harder to name. What we've been calling stealth wealth, the deliberate invisibility of the financially secure, carries a quieter assumption that opting out of status signaling is freedom, that the person who cancels the subscription has escaped the system entirely. The data doesn't support that reading. What it shows is a different cage. In camouflage biology, prey species that match their environment don't choose invisibility. They're shaped by threat. The adaptation is survival, not preference. Stealth wealth operates on a parallel architecture. The invisibility is a response to the cost of being seen, not a transcendence of the need to be seen. The person who stops signaling still monitors what others signal. The person who wears the plain watch still notices the Rolex. The person who drives the old sedan still registers the new one in the next lane. The scoreboard doesn't disappear. The player simply stops posting scores and then spends energy managing the discomfort of being underestimated. That discomfort is the cost no one accounts for. Being underestimated by strangers is tolerable. Being underestimated by peers, by family, by the people whose opinions actually register, that erodes something. And most people, given enough erosion, return to signaling. Not because they're weak, because the human nervous system was not built to sustain a gap between what it has and what it shows. Which means the question was never about spending or not spending. The question is whether identity survives without a witness. The signal and the silence. Two positions on the same board. One costs money. The other costs something harder to measure. The man with $4 million and the 2011 Civic isn't free. He's chosen a specific tax. He pays it in the assumptions strangers make, in the questions relatives don't ask, in the slow, private work of knowing what he has while the world sees someone who doesn't. Both positions require maintenance. Both positions are performances. The difference is the audience. One performs for strangers. The other performs for the mirror. And the mirror, unlike strangers, never looks away. The question that remains is what happens when someone who stopped performing discovers that the accumulation itself has stopped delivering.